welcome to another episode of Criterion Watch. I'm your host this time, Paul A Presenza, otherwise known as the Moo Cow, Moo. And today I am with...
Joe Turek.
Yay! And Joe, you've been with us on a number of different things. You've been on, Film Freaks, you've been on Indie Film Cafe. What else have you been on?
I think I've done a couple of the Criterion watches. And,
yeah.
A couple other mainstream stuff with Moody and
okay.
Stuff like that. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, this time around we are doing a very cool, interesting movie called Lady Snowblood from 1973. It's a Japanese sort of revenge movie. And wow, it is violent and bloody and lurid as hell, and it was amazing. It's not really the kind of film that I would have expected on Criterion Watch. I mean, you usually, like for Criterion Collection, you could think people like Ingmar Bergman and Louis Malle and people like that. This is really was kind of a surprise. I mean, I can see why it was selected. It's a beautiful film. It's amazing. It's just, wow. So Joe, what did you think? You hadn't seen this before, had you?
No, first time, and well, it's first time, and I'm not very fluent in a lot of these type of films. So the martial arts and stuff like that. So definitely was new to me, but that's always a good thing to see something new and to go into a different genre or experience different things and different cultures and different things all around. So yeah, I was really in for it. Plus the links that I'm sure we'll talk about to Tarantino.
Oh yeah. So that's definitely coming up. The little background. So this is definitely a Japanese film, and if most of you who follow Criterion Watch know that usually when you talk Criterion Collection, you're talking Akira Kurosawa, especially when it comes to samurai films. Those are all beautiful, beautifully shot films with amazing cinematography. The contrasts are just fabulous, and Kurosawa is just the master of setting stories within the samurai period in Japan. So it was really interesting to see another take on that coming from somebody who comes later on. This is Toshiya Fujita, who does this movie and also does the second film, the Song of Vengeance, I think it was.
I think that was the name of it.
Yeah, so he does two of them, and they both come on the Criterion disc, which is awesome. But the main difference between the Kurosawa one and this one, in addition to just the straight up story, I mean the story is a lot more violent and bloody, but just the colors, the absolutely vivid soaked colors in the film is just unbelievable. I mean, I can't stop thinking about the cinematography and the colors in this film. It's just amazing.
Beautiful. For the first scene where they had the whites going in the snow and the gushing blood, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit.
Oh yeah, the red Cravey comes out like an old friend.
The contrast, everything, the colors throughout.
Right. Cinematography. I mean, to me, that is the best part of the whole film. I mean, the story's fun, the action's great. It's all really, really cool. But when you're seeing all of even just the connecting scenes, like when they're in the streets and you're seeing the grays of all the stone, and at the base of them there's all the green from all the moss at the bottom, and then the black tiles that are on the roof with the wood and the brown and the tan and the beige in between. And then she comes along in her purple and with yellow flag, and everything just stands out. It's just amazing. So the digital transfer on this, let's see, where did I put the box? The digital transfer on this is absolutely fabulous. You have to see that just for that alone. So yeah, this is the complete Lady Snowblood 1 and Lady Snowblood 2 Love Song of Vengeance, which I have not seen, and we'll have to see that for another one.
One of the things you mentioned, talking about the buildings and stuff like that, you talked about the browns and the grays like that. You pointed out when we were actually watching it, and it just seemed so lived in. It seemed so real. It didn't seem like sets at all. So it seemed like it was really either well-established sets, or it was just, I mean, they really took the time to just go into a place that really fit the period and everything.
Right. They were very, very conscientious, I think, about how they were taking the story, which is, kind of a fantasy idea, especially with some of the effects, with some of the blood splurts and arterial sprays and all that, and, the crazy leaps that she does. And there's a lot of fantasy elements in this, but it is grounded in reality. The verisimilitude that they establish with all the sets, with all the streets, with all the exterior scenes, with all the other stuff, everything looks extremely realistic. It's like if you walked into a painting from the 1890s and set in Meiji period Japan. It's just fabulous. It's really, really good. And then the one really helps establish the other.
Yeah, you mentioned something about how it's grounded in the story and stuff like that. How about like a little bit of the background of the story?
Okay, so this is a story of vengeance, and the idea is that there was an event that happened in 1873 during the beginning of the Meiji period where there was a period of unrest, and there were these people that were going around pretending to be government officials by collecting money from peasants who were otherwise going to have to send their kids off to join the militia or join the local army because Japan was trying to become stronger, and they were getting involved in all these other conflicts. And of course, peasants, when they would get involved, they would just be killed. So they were trying to buy their way out of it, but they were cheating them, and they were collecting the money and just taking off with it. And I guess there were these government officials in white who were going around and either trying to find them out or something, and the family that happened to be the parents and brother of Yuki show up. This is before she's born, and he comes there dressed in white, and he's actually supposed to be the local school teacher, the new school teacher. They don't buy it, and the four people who are involved in this vengeance tale surprise them on the road, and they slaughter her family and rape the mother and just all these horrible things. And then the mother decides she's got to have her vengeance. So there's this, she goes through this whole ordeal where they rape her for several days, and then she ends up going back as the shopkeeper for one of them, and then she gets revenge by killing one.
One of the four is gone.
One of the four is by her, and then but she gets caught, so she has to go to jail, and then she realizes that since she's in jail for life, she can't pursue her vengeance, so then she starts having sex with every male that floats on by, every prison guard, anybody. And she mentions to the other female inmates about this, you despised me all this time because you thought I was a whore, but there was a reason for that, because I wanted to get pregnant so that I could have a kid, preferably a boy, who would carry on my vengeance. Well, she doesn't get a boy, but she does get Yuki, who when she's born and the snow is falling on her face, it's really an amazing opening scene. And then she turns to her just before she dies and says, "You're going to carry my vengeance on for me." And she also says, "You are an Ashura demon." So I guess that's some kind of a vengeance demon.
Yeah, some sort of demigod or something.
Right. So not a normal human. You sort of been born in order for this purpose. So it's very fatalistic, very, very Buddhist, in my opinion. And so the mother dies, and then the baby Yuki is there, and one of the other women who was there that helped assist with the birth leaves and takes the baby with her. And then they go to this priest, this really tough as nails, no nonsense priest, and basically gives the baby to him, explains what's going on, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, Ashura demon, I got it." So he trains her from a very young age to be this heartless killer by, putting her in barrels and rolling her down the hill so that she hits the stones and flies out and just smacks her around, and just the training things are amazing. Remember that?
Yeah, I'm used to seeing when there's those training montages or things about like in Star Wars where they go through the Jedi training, all those different things. They go through the training, and it's I don't want to say superficial, but it seems very okay, well, we'll believe it, so what? It happened, okay. In this, you really felt like the girl was going through some stuff.
She was failing over and over and over and getting punished every single time. There's even a part where he cuts the clothes off of her. 8 years old, my goodness. This poor kid with these huge, gorgeous eyes. You feel really bad for her, but on the other hand, he's doing it to toughen her up. so that she can actually go and do her vengeance and survive, and that's what happens. So I guess 20 years later, she's now running around and looking for the final 3 people that were involved in her original family's murder, and she starts tracking them down and killing them one at a time. She goes and finds Banzo Takamura, who's the first guy that she meets, and he's like a drunk and a gambler, but he has this really nice daughter who is, on the one hand, she looks like she's basket weaving, but she's actually tossing that into the ocean, and actually I guess she's a prostitute and getting money, and he doesn't even know that. You know, there's all this extra stuff. And then she comes and finds out and saves him from being beaten up by the local gang because he was cheating at gambling, and he doesn't understand why he did that, or why she did that, but then she kills him. That's the first one. Lets the daughter live.
Yeah. Yuki, I think with some of the upbringing and stuff like that, they made a couple points about the violent training that she was going through to prepare for all that she was going to be facing.
Right.
But they also, there was a couple times they mentioned about never losing sense of like a soul and like some sort of happiness or contentness or whatever of oneness within themselves. And spoiler, that sort of bites her a little bit with what happens with one of the characters.
Right.
But she really pursues her. There's a really good scene with Bonzo where they're playing, and he's playing a little bit of a crooked game and all that stuff. And but yeah, it leads ultimately to his demise. So that's number 2.
That's number 2, and then Kobuye ends up coming back to factor in later in the story when she gets away. And then, so Yuki goes off to Tokyo and is trying to track down the last one, because there was another one that she thought was still alive, but he turns out has died from a shipwreck. So she's really ticked off about that because he managed to escape her vengeance. So there's the last one is this woman, and she, in the meantime, has partnered up with this clan of beggars who's been sort of reaching out and trying to feel and get information for her, and they locate her, or they try to locate her, and it's been really, really tough. They were able to help her with the first couple, but so she has to go, and she meets Ryurei, who is an artist, and he like sort of does this magazine or newspaper, and he does like these sort of gossip rags, and he immediately sizes her up and says, oh yeah, there's a story here, and he's pestering her and wants to find out what's going on, and she won't tell him. She's like, just stay away from me. And then he ends up running into the priest, who tells him everything. Now you don't see that, but that comes out in the story later on. And the reason he ends up doing that, because Yuki goes back to him and says, why did you tell him that? He says, well, because it's the bait that's going to get the last one to show herself so that you can go and kill her. And she's like, okay, I get that. And that's basically what happens. She ends up reading the story because it becomes a big hit, and she ends up sending a bunch of ruffians to go and pick up Ryurei, takes him back, beats the hell out of him. And in the meantime, here comes Yuki to save the day and slaughter everybody in sight, which she does. And then just when she's about to get her revenge on the woman, she ends up hanging herself to sort of escape her vengeance. But doesn't really escape for long. She like sees her there hanging, and Yukio just is like, yeah, whatever, and just slices her in half.
Yeah. Had to get some form of vengeance for her.
Right.
For all the trials of her life and what happened to her mom, at least, if not her parent. I mean, because I guess they never really explained who her true dad was, but it's sort of somebody from the town, the people, or whatever.
Or one of the guards. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. But it shows that she's come from the people, so she's avenging some of the people. So,
right.
Avenging her mom, especially, and her what would have probably been her dad.
Right.
Because that he was the teacher, and they were a happy couple.
So at this point, they both figure she's done, that her vengeance is done, and she's kind of like, well, I'm not sure what to do now. And then he goes back and he's starting to write more stuff, and then bingo, here comes Dear Old Dad. And it turns out Dear Old Dad was the last one, and he was like, he faked his death, basically. And he had cut ties with him. Ryurei had cut ties with his dad a long time ago and didn't like him. But the dad basically came back and says, "Hey, I'm an arms dealer. I'm making money. I've got all kinds of stuff going on, and you better stay the hell away and stop writing this crap and leave me alone and don't get involved." And that's what happens. And then he tells Yuki about it, and then Yuki tracks him back to this party that's going on. It's the Meiji period, so right about now, and there's all kinds of political and social commentary that's also going on in this film that I guess we can touch on a little bit. But there's this sort of costume party going on, and they've reached out to the West, so there's a lot of like Americans and English and German people in there, and they're all in costumes and these really nice late 19th century costumes. They're very bright and vivid, and there's all this Western classical music going on, and they're all trying to sort of mingle, and apparently it's a pleasure palace because one of the things that Ryurei's father says is that, oh, it's just a bunch of crap, it's just a bunch of show. They're there to make, to have pleasure and exchange money and get guns, and I'm just going to profit off of that. But he's hiding there, and he has a double, which we don't know about. And then Yuki goes in there, and she thinks she kills him, but it turns out it's the double. And then the father ends up escaping, and then there's this whole rigmarole between Ryurei and the father, and then, it ends up Yuki gets her revenge.
And over top the flags, too.
And over the top of the flag. There's some really,
Beautiful.
really good shots in there. Just amazing. And you can definitely see the Tarantino-esque kind of stuff that's going on. And then finally, just when you think it's at the end, because Yukio gets shot and all this, and because she's not like some superhero that never gets cut. She gets cut a number of times. She comes out and she's bleeding and everything. And then here comes Kobuye, the daughter from Bonzo, all the way back there, and she gets her revenge by because she killed her father and stabs her, and they go through this whole thing at the end where she's in the snow and it looks like she might be dead, but at the last second it looks like she's still alive, which is good because part 2 is going to be coming out, which is set 10 years later. So
yeah, I'm not sure what. It'd be interesting to know maybe some of the background, if there's some commentary or some other stuff going on in there. If this was anticipated to be 2 parts or maybe more. I don't know if it's based off of.
I think so.
Some manga
it is. It is. It's based on a manga written by Kozuye Koike. That was the story. He was the one who wrote it, and then a lot of the panels that were taken from them were drawn by Kozure Kamakura, and they actually show up in the film. So they're showing some of the panels that were drawn by there, and it's interesting because Kamakura is also the guy who drew Lone Wolf and Cub, which was a very, very famous manga. It also became a very famous set of movies. So, but it's done in that style. That's why a lot of the cinematography is set the way that it's set. Everything is kind of presented in a sort of manga-ish kind of way, only instead of black and white, it's definitely color-soaked. So if you guys are into Japanese manga, you're definitely going to love this film.
Yeah, I really liked with them at the beginning of each of the chapters. Predominantly, they gave some a little backstory on some of the segments they were heading into, and then they gave some of the still art and the drawings and stuff like that. But it also gave a background on of history that I'm not very fluent in at all. But I'm sure there's a lot more that maybe got lost culturally speaking and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it seems like there's a lot more politically going on in this film than I just touched the grade. I just caught the top end of it, but I'm sure there's a lot more going on there.
There's a lot of commentary, a lot of social and political commentary. But the thing is, you don't really need to know it. I mean, it helps. It's nice. It makes the experience richer. But the story pretty much stands on its own, even if you don't know anything about what's going on in the period.
I think this is going to make like a second or third viewings, the multiple viewings. You'll get added context to where a lot of the pains and the struggles that the people from the different villages are coming from.
And just a little background: this was a movie that had come to the State Theater in Newark way back in the day, in like the mid '80s when I was in college, freshman year of college, and I'd seen it, but I hadn't seen it or even thought about it in 30 years. So when I saw that it had been released on Blu-ray, not only Blu-ray but Criterion, I'm like, oh, I got to check this out. I remember liking it. I remember the violence. I remember the blood. but I didn't remember any of the details, and I didn't remember if it was going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, I liked this back then, but now it's like kind of passé. Oh no, this was really, really good.
Yeah, I'm wondering. It's like, I mean, you say you liked it then, being that it's 30-some years later, in a different stage in life and stuff like that. How does it feel now? I mean,
I appreciate the artistic merits of the film a lot more now than I did back then. I think the luridness and the violence and the blood was cool, and that's kind of what I was after, but the way that it was shot, the non-linear storytelling that the director chose to do, the way that the composition for many of the shots are based on manga, and you can see the way that it's set up to be just like a painting or just like a panel from a really well drawn comic. That kind of stuff really, really affected me, and this time around. And like you said, I can't wait to do another 1 or 2 more viewings so I can soak in some of the details. The details in every frame is amazing. It's really, really rich and in depth, a lot of depth to it.
yeah, this is definitely a film that I'm going to be watching again. I mean, I know it's on one of the streaming services that I have, and definitely will be seeking this out because there is a lot, I think, going on that multiple viewings will bring to the table.
And we would be remiss from saying that Quentin Tarantino loved this film. He loved it so much that quite a lot of it was utilized to base his Kill Bill movie on. So you can definitely see parallels between Lady Snowblood and The Bride. But not only that, not only in characters and story, but certainly a lot of shots. I mean, we both recognized several shots that were like, that was done in Kill Bill.
Yeah, there was a shot with the four that killed him on. They were over top, and I was like, okay, that's Kill Bill straight up there. And then there was with the sword.
Right.
I was like, oh.
Even down to the music, the song that begins the movie and ends the movie is a song called Shura no Hana, which means flower of carnage. And Quentin Tarantino used that song in the first Kill Bill. So he clearly enjoyed this film, and just from like the arterial blood spray, swordplay alone, you can definitely see the impact that this movie had on him. But if you liked Kill Bill, and you like Tarantino, and you like manga, and you like samurai, and you like just action films but are done in like a smart way, you're gonna like this film.
Yeah. And with Tarantino-esque, I mean, I'm always afraid going into a film if it's like all that they're just ripping it off. I think he used different elements of it, and he used like some tones and stuff like that for some of the characters, some of the ambiguity of the like really who they really were that come from him and stuff. But he did it differently, so you could tell it was inspired by. He hasn't run from that either, so I mean he's said how much it's inspired him, and the fact that he has brought that over, and years ago when I saw Kill Bill, I know that there was some, but I didn't know what it was, and I never watched it. But that he's brought this to a whole another audience is something special.
Oh yeah, and back in 1985, I had no idea who Quentin Tarantino was, but
he wasn't around for another 5 to 8 years. Or so
right.
Yeah.
So, but when I had read later on in life that this was a film that he had drawn influence from, I was like, oh, okay, I remember seeing that movie, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. And then finally, when it came out, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to check this out and see exactly how much of an influence it was. And it's a huge, huge influence, without it being like a ripoff. It's definitely not a ripoff. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
But the influence is certainly there, especially in the way that the story is told. Because Tarantino, of course, brings his own writing skills and his own directorial skills and his own vision to Kill Bill. And it would be an interesting parallel to watch the two movies together, just to see how much of it is influence and how much is Tarantino's own stuff that he's bringing to Kill Bill. But I think if you like Kill Bill, you'll definitely like this film.
Yeah.
So a little bit about the acting. The acting is fabulous. It's really, really well done. Yuki is played by Meiko Kaiji, who is gorgeous and an amazing actress, and you just absolutely believe every second that she's on the screen. What did you think?
I mean, she's had a long career since then. It appears. I mean, 150 credits or something like that. But I mean, she had these eyes and stuff like that. Even though it's like when she was walking, and it's she was in the we talked about the colors and everything, the purple, the gown and everything, and she was just, but you could just see in her eyes and stuff like that when she crossed paths with the rickshaw. It was just like you could just see there's so much emotion going on in her.
Right, right.
I mean, she did a great job, and I mean, obviously the physical aspects of it. There was definitely that to go on top of it. But.
And it's not like a two-dimensional kabuki kind of a performance either. You can tell that there is conflict, that there is emotion, that there's all this stuff bubbling beneath the surface that she would love to pursue or like to indulge in like a regular human being, but she can't because she's got this spirit of Ashu in her, and she's sworn to take this path of vengeance, and she can't deviate from that path. Now, it'll be very, very interesting to me how the second movie starts, because her vengeance is done.
Yeah, the arc of her character has been met. So it's like, I mean, is the second one just going to venture off into being an escape film or who knows where?
The cool thing is that there are consequences, because she does her vengeance, but just because that happened doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going to want to have their vengeance. So that's kind of where that ends up picking up. From what I've read, I've not seen the film. I'm dying to see the film. We will probably watch this again for another Criterion watch, just to sort of give you guys the bookends on this at some point. But for now, we're just going to stick with the First Lady Snowblood. So we talked a little bit about Meiko Kaji, who played Yuki. She was really, really, really good. The other one who really stood out was the guy who played Ryurei, who's the writer and the guy who's writing down all the stuff and sort of telling her story. He's played by Toshio Kurosawa. I thought he was really, really good, and he kind of has his own story going on at the same time, sort of a parallel story with what's going on with his dad. Clearly there's some serious stuff going on that is hinted at without really going into it, because of course it's Yuki's story. But there's enough going on that it really makes it a kind of an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and he didn't show up until chapter 4 of it. So I mean,
right.
But there was enough depth given to his character and his performance that sort of made it feel like he was part of the whole film.
Right.
Coming out of it. I mean, it wasn't just I mean, literally, he was only in probably 25 minutes maybe.
Something like that. But, yeah. Other than Yuki, most of the other characters kind of come and go.
Yeah.
You know. But he was really, really good in that role, and he really stood out. And then the other character that stood out to me was Kobuye Takamura, who's played by Yoshiko Nakata. And
I'm glad you're doing a lot of these.
Yeah, I know. These are not easy.
I'm not sure if you're hitting these 100% or even
probably
close to
not.
it.
My Japanese is minimal.
Probably a little bit better than I would be hitting it.
You do the best you can. But I thought she was really, really good. She comes in early in the film where she plays Takamura's daughter. Okay, so she's the one who's weaving all the baskets and chucking them into the ocean, and then going out and being a prostitute to keep her father, who's a drunk and a gambler, from being destitute. And so you feel for her, and then she ends up meeting Yuki at one point, but she doesn't know who she is, and she tells her her and Yuki's right away. She's like, "Oh dear, I got to go kill your dad," and she seems like.
Well, she gives her message about going to was it the place in Tokyo?
Right. If something ever happens to your dad, come to Tokyo, and here's the address. And she's like, "What would ever happen to my dad?" And she's like,
Well, she appears in chapter 4.
But she seems really, really nice. I mean, she probably not happy about doing what she's doing to support her dad, but she's doing it. You know, she clearly has feelings for him, and she's just very sweet. You know, she gives Yuki a present that she made, and she's just very, very nice. But then later on, she finds out the reality of what happens. A, what her father ended up doing, which is eye-opening to begin with, and then B, she finds out that Yuki wasn't just there as happenstance. She was hunting her father down and killing him. So she gets very, very bitter. She finds this out from Ryurei, who wrote all about it. And then she decides that she needs to have her vengeance too. And Ryurei's trying to tell her, you know, don't get involved, you don't want to be part of this. And then that's when the thugs come in and drag him away. And then she runs off. Well, she ends up coming back at the very end after Yuki's finally killed all of her guys, and she's coming out of the costume thing, and she's wounded, and she's in the snow, and then she kind of, Kobuye runs up and goes, and stabs her, and we all figured that's it, and she looks her right in the eye, And for like a brief second, she kind of like says, "Okay, I did what I had to do," and then she runs off. She doesn't like wallow in it or laugh or anything like that. So it's interesting to see her go from this sort of sweet, almost innocent, naive villager to this person who's also having their vengeance in a different way. And then Yukio is just kind of by herself. She's been shot, she's been stabbed, she's been slashed, she's bloody all over the place. She's laying down in the snow and screaming. And at one point, she's just gripping the ice with her bloodied fist.
Oh, that crispy sound.
And you can hear the sound of the ice crystals getting crushed. And it was amazing. It was so cool. Just the level of detail in this was just so neat. And then that's when the movie's just about to pull away and you think she might not make it, and then her head lifts up and she's like, not quite dead yet. And it'll move into the second film, presumably, which I believe I've read is set 10 years later. So that'll be very interesting.
Well, I liked all the different things we were talking about there. There was also the element of, Kabui sort of personifies it, is that every action, that everything that somebody does in life, that there's consequences from it. There's a reaction for it. There's the people that raped and killed Yuki's mom. They're all sought out and taken care of. But in the process of doing that, Yuki sort of puts a target on her.
Right.
From Kabui, and it's just that there's, and that's something that reflects real life. I mean, that every action, there's consequences, and
very fatalistic.
Good, bad, sometimes. I mean, in this case, bad, but that's life.
Well, I have not actually read or seen the manga, so I'm not exactly sure how much the story in this film parallels the comic. Excuse me, but I can tell you that the screenplay for this film was written by Norio Asada, and I thought it was really, really, really well done, especially with the very tricky way of non-linear storytelling. I mean, all these kind of flashbacks kind of weave back and forth. It doesn't follow an A to B to C. You have to sort of go around a little bit to get more and more details. But the story you don't get lost because of that. You're just finding out more information in a different stylistic way, and I thought that they did a really good job with that.
But and I like when movies can do, if they can do it the right way, like this one was done the right way, because what it does is it takes even though it's taken something back before, going back, give you some backstory, it's further developing some of the feelings and some of the emotional drive that's going on, and sometimes it's just giving you some events that give you some backstory on who this person is or what this event was, but it continuously adds to it. But if they would have took it out and put it in a linear way, then it'll just be like a conventional. It could be more conventional film, and it might not play quite the same.
Unlike other films where sometimes you get the feeling where it's just been edited in such a way to be non-linear just for the sake of being non-linear, this is done in a way that purposely enhances the narrative, which is very, very important. So I thought Asada did a very, very good job with writing it that way. But again, to me, the big star is the cinematography by Masaki Tamura. Just the color soakedness, the way shots are framed. Some of the shots were just the one guy towards the end when he's finally slain and goes over the edge and grabs the flag of Japan and ends up falling on the floor. That was really well done.
And the U.S. flag's right next to it and all. And some of the, when the person was bleeding into the water, and you saw the red just going into the water, and they sort of panned up, and you see the person laying over top just bleeding out.
Or the scene where she is like crouching up on top of a wall, and there are all those other guards around, and she sends the purple umbrella down.
Yeah, the way it just
and all the guards are like, well, what the hell's that? And she distracts them long enough to come down and just start. The fight scenes were amazing. I don't remember who the fight scene coordinator was, but clearly he knew what the hell he was doing.
Absolutely.
And everything looked really, really good. Very, very, I don't want to say realistic, but you bought it, And like I said, it's not like she never gets hit or never gets cut or anything. She does, and she bleeds. Yeah. She definitely gets hurt. It's just that her mind is so focused on her vengeance that she just doesn't pay attention to any suffering that she has.
Yeah, her whole life was basically trained for that. Plus, if you believe in sort of the the after or before life sort of entrenched into part of who she is. I mean, that's everything she is to take care of that mission, if you will.
Right.
Another thing I really liked was, we were talking about the umbrella, but the sword sort of hidden in the umbrella.
Hidden in the umbrella, yeah, that was really cool. I enjoyed that a lot. And the fact is, and she doesn't just like slice them, she's like cutting off hands and cutting off arms and cutting off everything. I mean, there was some pretty amazing stuff that was going on.
Yeah, it was the first few minutes. It's like the person lost an arm and it's just blood.
Right.
I'm like
Right.
okay, I know what we're in for here.
And how about that scene with where the woman was thinking she was going to get away with hanging herself, and she's like, and then like the torso just goes, and all the blood goes. Whoosh.
Yep, just one fell swoop, just knock.
Right, and I think I mentioned to you early on what I remembered from this film was kind of like if you were to take an Akira Kurosawa samurai film and you mixed it in a Sam Peckinpah Western where there was blood all over the place and stylistic violence. To me, that's kind of how it was. So I guess that kind of still stands if you also mix in sort of Quentin Tarantino's style and storytelling. There you go. So that's quite a thing. And like I said, for me, it's quite a shock because seeing a Kurosawa samurai movie from the 40s and 50s, and just the way that it's done and how costumey it is, and there's violence there, but it's nothing like the stylistic violence of this film, and it certainly lacks the arterial spray and blood-soaked passion of this particular film. And it's a lot more lurid than anything that Kurosawa would have done. And again, I guess that's why I was sort of surprised that Criterion would have picked this film up. But now that I've seen it, after all these years, I totally understand why this film is something that they would want to do. Now, this is a 2K transfer. I believe they took it from a 35mm print, and it looks gorgeous. It sounds great. There's some very interesting music that comes up.
Yeah, there was some that felt like period piece, and there was some. It had some sort of 70s type of thing going on a little bit, and then at the end where it had some of the Western classical, that stuff. So I mean, but it fit what was going on at that part of the story.
Right.
So I mean, in all, when I was watching it, it didn't feel like it was made in like the early 70s. I mean, there's some elements that could tie it to that to an older film, but I mean, as beautiful as it was to watch, I mean, it seemed it could hold up today's time.
Especially with the music, it felt very Tarantino-esque. There were a lot of freeze frame shots.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, that you can definitely see Tarantino done, and of course a lot of directors back in the 60s and 70s would do that. But there's a lot of flourishes and a lot of influences that you can definitely see that Tarantino. So like I said, if you're a Tarantino fan, you're going to like this film.
Well, the whole painting aspect, I mean, when they were doing the letters and stuff like that.
Oh, the calligraphy, yeah.
Just the right on there, and the freeze frame making the painting, and then you could tell that there was a lot of the manga aspects too.
Absolutely.
That it all ties up in there.
So yeah, you get to see calligraphy, you get to see like traditional basket weaving, you get to see all kinds of stuff. A lot of really cool period costumes, and just the streets of Tokyo were done in a way that I hadn't really seen things before. And it was really interesting because then you get to see how people live. I love the homes, the Japanese homes with all the sliding paper doors and everything. That was really cool.
Well, it's just the whole detail of you mentioned the basket weaving. The amount of time that she seemed very well versed in it, being able to do that. And I mean, that's taking the time just to have the actress learn that or what have you. I mean, the little details in this was really taken care of, and I think that just shows the worth of this film.
Absolutely. So, only thing I can tell you at this point is if you like this kind of a film, if you like action, if you like just detailed, beautiful storytelling with a little bit of blood-soaked violence tossed in.
Just a little bit. Not much.
This is your film. I mean, when you see, this poor little baby born to do nothing but carry on this mother's vengeance, and you're seeing the snow falling on the kid's face, it's like you're in for a really good film.
And for me, it's like that I had not actually been fluent in many films from this genre, this time period, this type of works. Definitely has me interested in seeing some more of those.
There's a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of good samurai stuff. Apart from Kurosawa, I feel they tend to be a little more costumey, flowery kind of a thing. A lot of them have violence, but not quite the stylistic violence in this particular film. So, and it's interesting. Like I said, it was directed by Toshio Fujita, and he also ended up doing the second film as well. From what I gather, most of his other films were more things like adolescent films, teenage,
Really?
yeah, kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Nothing like this. So I don't know whether he was inspired by the manga, or if he was inspired by Norio Osada's screenplay, or how exactly it came about. I'd love to do some research on where this film came from. I think in here there is, in the actual Criterion, I believe that there is a documentary or two, or commentary from, yeah, there's commentary from Koike, the writer of the manga, and so there's some other extras in here that may shed some details that I really want to check out.
Interesting. It says New English Subtitle Translation. So I wonder if they maybe cleaned up some of the cultural differences or something like that between times and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
but I was able to
probably.
follow the story. I mean, I could watch subtitle films anyway, so I mean it's fine. Much better watching dubbed films. But
Right.
the story, everything flowed really well to where it I mean, subtitle didn't really bother me at all. I mean, yeah.
There were a couple of times, especially when the film is presenting a scene that is a panel from a manga where it's black and white, where some of the subtitles are also in white. That was a little difficult sometimes
that,
for
yeah.
me. It just white on white just doesn't work as well. I kind of wish it had been like a blood red or something. It would have really stood out. But that aside, that's probably the only quibble I have with this film. So, what can I tell you? This was a home run. This was a Japanese baseball home run. So definitely go out and find yourself a copy of the Criterion Complete Lady Snowblood movie. Now, it's not a trilogy. I wish to God it was. Maybe Quentin Tarantino can make the third film.
This is a great title too.
I know,
Lady
I know.
Snowblood. I mean,
It
that's
says it all.
I mean, the contrast in there of her snow whitish character almost in some ways. It seemed like snow, and then the aspect of blood, and then just the contrast that happened in the film.
And there's this great scene at the end where you're watching the snow fall, like this blizzard, but it's soaked in red, so it's like blood snow. And I'm like, wow, it's like a blood snow blizzard. It's really appropriate for this film. It's just really, really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, the visuals are great, the story's great, the acting's great, the music's great, the cinematography's unbelievable. You know, full marks. 10 out of 10. 20 out of 10.
And thank you, Tarantino, for bringing it to the country.
Absolutely.
Bringing it to the attention for a lot of people in the U.S.
Absolutely. Well, I think that about wraps up this episode of Criterion Watch. Thank you all very much for joining us. We will be doing Lady Snowblood 2, A Love Song of Vengeance, at some point. We will let you know. I'm sure you would like to see it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm not going to watch it until we do it for this show. So there you go. It should be very, very fascinating. And we will see you next time on Criterion Watch. Thank you very much, and bye.
Bye.